And we've been doing a one-off series. This is another one-off sermon. And today is really a think about your thinking type of sermon. So what do I really think about the subject? And particularly the subject of how do I understand God is involved in my life? How do I understand God is involved in my life? So I'm going to imagine, I'm not sure how I'm going to transition this, but so the topic is, how is God involved in my life? That's kind of the topic. But think about 20 minutes ago, or whenever you came into this room. Remember, you were outside on the street. Everyone just nod your head. Yeah, I was outside on the street. And then you walked into the building, and then you came up the stairs, and the doors were open, the red doors were open. And just as you entered the room, now just think back, it's only 20 minutes ago, just as you entered the room, did you stop for any reason? Like, did you hesitate for any reason? Or did you just keep walking in and talking? And like, I'd say most of us just kind of walked in and we're talking, or we're thinking about coffee, or we're thinking about where will I sit. But if you think about that, you were really taking a huge risk. That's a huge risk to take. Supposing there was no oxygen in the room. Supposing there was no oxygen in the room. You could have died walking in here. Like, surely, at the very least, you should have taken it before you came in to hold your breath and walk in, so like you'd have a little bit. Or you'd wait outside and see if people fall down when they come in here, because that would give an indication maybe there isn't oxygen. But like, you came into this room without even thinking about it. Surely that's reckless. You're taking your life in your hands. How do you know that there's oxygen in the room? Say if there was no oxygen. Now, you're all sitting there, especially if you're a guest, this is your first time thinking, I'm not coming back here again. I knew Sean was strange. Now he's saying we should check every room that there's oxygen in it. But we know there's oxygen in the room. We just know it. But actually, we don't know it. Not strictly. What we are is we're confident that there's oxygen in the room. Every room we've ever gone into has had oxygen. I've never been in a room that didn't have oxygen. Every other time we've been in this room, there's been oxygen. So our experience tells us there will be oxygen in this room when we come in. So you can let your breath out and breathe. There is oxygen in here, folks. So we walk into the room without even thinking about it. You see, we have confidence or trust that there's oxygen in the room. We don't think about it. We just act like it's true. That it's reality. And hey, presto, you know what? It is. Because we're still alive. It's as if underneath what we're doing, walking into the room, is this assumption about oxygen being everywhere we go. We operate on that assumption that it's true. You could say, and you're kind of thinking, where is this? This feels like a science class, but we'll get towards the spirituality now. You could say that we have faith, our confidence, our trust that there's oxygen in the room. And that faith underlies us coming into the room, and we behave accordingly. We just walk in without thinking about it. Actually, that's what faith is. Confidence or trust that reality is a certain way. And then you act on that confidence. And we live exercising faith all the time. It doesn't have to have anything to do with God. Like, when you sat down, you didn't like look at the chair and check it and everything. You just kind of sat. You were confident that the chair would support you. If you're going to the airport and you have a plane to catch and you're going by bus, you might think, well, the 5 o'clock, I'm not sure if it'll get me there. I'm going to go at the 3 o'clock bus to make sure so as I can be confident. So you act accordingly. You get the 3 o'clock bus. You simply understand the reality is that there's oxygen in the room, and you act accordingly. Faith is a confidence or a belief or a trust that reality is a certain way, and then simply living like that's true. That's what faith is. So we define it, we'd say it's something like that. Faith is confidence in what we hope for, oxygen in the room, or the chair will support me, and the assurance of what we do not see, oxygen in the room. That's the definition from the Bible. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. That there's an invisible world that's real. But we're not talking about sitting on a chair or even holding your breath in case there's no oxygen. It's confidence in what God's word says about God, says about us, and says about God's involvement in our lives. Confidence about God, about us, and about His involvement in our lives. And if you remember right at the start, one of the focus of this is His involvement in our life. So let's just look at one statement, okay? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Psalm 23. Many of us have memorized it. That's telling us something about God's involvement in our lives. Supposing you and me lived like that was reality. Supposing you lived like that was reality. Like when you walked in, there's just oxygen there. That God is my shepherd, I shall not want. In every moment, in every circumstance, in every setting, the Lord is your shepherd. It simply is reality that God is your good shepherd caring for you, and that you can never live your life outside His care. He is always caring for you. How would your attitude and your mindset be different in life? What would that do to complaining and grumbling? I'm a gifted complainer and grumbler. But supposing I knew that God was always my shepherd and I lived in His care, well, what's the point in grumbling and complaining? Because I'm being cared for. What would it do to worry and anxiety? What would it do to fear about the future? This is a lesson that Paul learned. And remember, we were training in our thinking. We're apprentices, like Lauren said, being taught by Jesus. But Paul learned this lesson about the reality of the equivalent of oxygen being in the room. You see, he came to understand that he was living his everyday life in every circumstance, in God's care and in God's power. That was reality. And how he came to understand it, he asked God about something. He was in this situation that was really difficult for him to bear. And he asked God to take it away. It was a really difficult, painful circumstance. So let's read the passage. This is from 2 Corinthians. He says, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul is describing something that became reality for him. That God's grace or God's power is sufficient for him in the circumstances of his life, even though the circumstances didn't change. So much so that he boasts. is delighted in setbacks for Christ's sake, because that's where he began to experience the reality that God was his shepherd. He experienced the care and provision and connectedness with Jesus. It was simply reality for him. His circumstances didn't change. Now, think about Paul and God before he came to this realization that God's grace would be sufficient for him. Before he came to understand that was how God was involved in his life. So we're talking before and after. Before and after, has God changed in any way in relation to Paul? Before and after? No. God hasn't changed at all. God hasn't become more powerful. God hasn't become more present. God hasn't become more anything. God actually can't become more anything. He's God. And he hasn't changed in how he related to Paul. The reality of God and God's involvement in Paul's life hasn't changed. Did Paul's circumstances change in any way? Paul's life circumstances didn't change in any way. He still has that thorn in his flesh. Whatever it was, the setback, the insult, the hardship, whatever it was. The key question is, what has changed? What has changed? God hasn't changed. Paul's circumstances hasn't changed. What's changed is Paul's understanding of God, and especially Paul's understanding of God's involvement in his life. I can still be in God's care in the midst of hardships and suffering. I can still be in God's care in the midst of hardship and suffering. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. See, hardships, they weren't simply to be endured, although they do have to be endured. They weren't simply to be prayed against, although we're told to pray to seek relief. They're the arena where God's presence and empowering in life became most real for Paul. He said, God is my shepherd. And I found that in this place of hardship. What changed for Paul, remember, God didn't change. Circumstances didn't change. What changed for Paul was Paul's understanding of God's involvement in his life and in his circumstances. That God was found in the very place that Paul wanted to avoid, because he didn't understand how God's presence worked in his life. Remember, we're talking about what's God's involvement in our life look like? So ask this question again. What if you lived like the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? What if you lived like that? What if that was reality for you? That's a staggering thought. That's a staggering thought. Regardless of the circumstance, and we can think of some dire circumstances. Regardless of the circumstance, Paul became confident that his life was lived always in God's care. Always in God's care. So suppose you want to live your life in God's presence, sustained by his power, and all of us at different times, maybe all the time, have thorns in our side. What's your thorn right now? Supposing the effect of that is to cause you to realize God is caring for you in the midst of it all. Might you not, like Paul, then boast and delight in difficulties and setbacks, not because you like pain, because they always bring pain, but because they make God more real to you. The joy of your heart. That our soul longs to bless him, and he becomes more real to us in it. And if that became your understanding of reality, That was the framework through which you lived and experienced reality. Next time hardship struck, you might be like Paul and say, I'm finding more of the boundless riches of Christ in here. Actually, I'm finding his care so profound in here, it's even better than when things are good. That's what faith looks like. A trust or confidence that what Jesus says is reality. I am your good shepherd. And then we act like that's true. So when I say to you, there's oxygen in this room, and you walk in, how would you know you don't trust me? How would you know you don't trust me? You would either not go into the room, or make sure you had an oxygen tank with you, or hold your breath. How would you know if you trust me? You would just walk in. You would just walk in. You would behave like it's reality. Acting like it's reality is really, really important because it tells you where your faith is. Dallas Willard says it this way: faith is simply an understanding of how things are, wedded to a commitment to live one's life in the light of that understanding. That there's oxygen in the room. Like if you think about the oxygen in the room example, we simply understand that all rooms have oxygen in them. So much so we don't even think about it. We are so confident that there's going to be oxygen in the room. Not one of us have ever thought, I wonder, will there be oxygen in the room? We just behave like it's reality. Going into the room is a sign that we're living in the light of that understanding. Going into the room was us acting or behaving like that's what we understand reality to be. So what's the equivalent of going into the room when it comes to Jesus? What's the equivalent? It's behaving like what Jesus says is true. And you know what the Bible calls that? Obedience. Obedience. I think we've Romans 5:1 up there. 1:5 even. It says, Paul says, through him we received grace and apostleship to call the Gentiles to obedience, that the obedience that comes from the faith for his name's sake. And the phrase I want to focus on, obedience that comes from faith. Now, if we're saying faith is confidence, the obedience that comes from confidence. So obedience in this context isn't to start something. It isn't some rule you have to keep. It's not something that we have to do because we're told to do it. But it's a response to what we understand reality to be. We understand reality. Obedience brings us into that place of life from God, care from God, comfort from God. So that's why we walk in obedience. So when Jesus says, don't worry, we don't worry, not because it's a command, but because our understanding of reality is that our Heavenly Father is always caring for us. And if that's true, if it's true, see, remember we're saying, think about our thinking. Do we really believe it's true? Is He always caring for us? If that's true, why worry? Now, if He isn't always caring for us, there's lots of reasons to worry. Finances, health, kids, relationships. There's lots of reasons to worry if we don't believe we're being cared for. But if we know our Father is always caring for us, and we behave and act accordingly, that's where we get this slide, friendship, dependency, obedience, from. We start with this encounter with a person, the person of Jesus, the God who is. And that encounter is actually a relationship, the beginning of a relationship. And so we have this interactive relationship with this friend, this being, this God who now has made His home in us. He's captivated our hearts and our minds. And so we start with this encounter with a person. You might not have perfect theology. You don't know everything that's in the Bible. You might not even believe everything that's in the Bible. But you know you've met the longing to your soul. And then as you do, this relationship, you're beginning to get to know him. And you're beginning to think, I think I can depend on him. I think I can begin to trust him. That he is who he claims to be, that he is my shepherd. And what that trusting looks like, what that confidence looks like, is obedience. You say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to do what he says in these areas of my life. Not because there's this list of do's and don'ts, but because I want to trust him that he's caring for me and what he says will bring his care into my life. So what's happening is your friendship with him leads to this dependency on him. And the dependency in action is just obedience. And then as you're obedient, you begin to realize he really can be trusted. I know he can be trusted. I have the experience in obedience that Jesus can be trusted. And that obedience wells up into more trust, more friendship, more deepening transformation by Jesus. And it's like this virtuous circle that increasingly we become the kind of people who have our hearts more and more surrendered to Jesus in love and submission. And we're being transformed into the kind of people who would look like Jesus if he was living our lives. So faith, it's just confidence that Jesus is who he said he is. It's unseen, but real. And then you act like it's true. And it's important to understand that not everything we say we believe, we actually believe. We don't actually believe that he is my shepherd always caring for me. We do when it's sunny. But when it's raining, how can he be caring for me when it's raining? And how do you know if you believe something? You just act like it's true. There's oxygen in the room. You walk into the room without thinking about it because you're confident oxygen is there. How do you know that you trust Jesus? You simply obey what he says. Not because it's rules, but it's the way he cares for us. And it's important to understand, faith isn't blind faith. I just have to believe strong enough. It's not faith in faith, it's faith in a person. Faith in what is unseen. And it grows through our reasoning and thinking about it, and it grows through our experience. So it's not about throwing out our brains, but using our thinking to deepen our trust in Jesus. The reality that he is always with us, always caring for us. So two things. How do you grow in this? One, in Mark 9, some of you might know the story of a father whose son is demonized, and he asks Jesus to heal him. And his response to Jesus is, I believe, help my unbelief. That's a prayer that I can pray. I believe, help my unbelief. Because there are parts of unbelief in my life. And then the second way you can do it, remembering our friendship, dependence, obedience, and it's all about trusting a person. So take some of the things that the Bible tells us that you're finding difficult to obey and begin to obey them. Maybe it's the Bible's teaching on sex, or the Bible's teaching on being blessed when you serve others, or the Bible's teaching on tithing. Somewhere where you're finding it hard to trust Jesus. And then try practicing obedience in that area. Not once, but for a year or two. Some area where you're not obedient right now, and you're going to try. And what will happen is you'll gain experience that Jesus can be trusted. And don't do it as rule keeping, but the setting of friendship, dependence, obedience. E, do you want to get your guys up? And if Jesus teaching on sex or money or serving it, that's just too big. Too big. Just try prayer. Just try 15 minutes every day, 5 days a week. Don't even try it for 7 days. Just try 15 minutes, 5 days a week. Not for a week, but for a year or two. And see how you'll be changed by that friendship. Because we're apprentices. We're learning how to live this. Jesus knows. We're learning how to live this. So what I'd like to do before we worship is that verse. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Just close your eyes. I'm just going to invite the Holy Spirit just to rest on all of us. And let the reality that the Lord is my shepherd in every situation, regardless of the circumstances, and He's with you right now. Your shepherd is with you right now. So just wait quietly. Now, Holy Spirit, continue to move on us. Continue to move on us. I just sense for some, it's just like you just have to let things down. It's like to give what you've been carrying to Jesus, to let Him be your shepherd. So just let it go. Let Him be your shepherd. Just let it go. Holy Spirit, just give people a vision of you as the shepherd. And for some of us, really scary. It's really, really scary. I don't know that I want to do this. Just tell Jesus, I don't know what it'll mean for my life if I do this. Just tell Him, Jesus, I want to surrender. I'm not ready to surrender yet, but I want to. The Spirit is here. Just more of your presence now, Lord. More of your presence. And some of us have been believing lies that He can't care for us because of sins in our life or sin in our life. Romans 8 says, who is He who accuses? He who gave His own Son, not Him. Not Jesus who died. More than that, is raised to life and is at the right hand of the Father interceding for you. Who can separate you from the love of God in Christ? Not even your own sin. More of your presence now, Lord. More of your presence. Lord, would you release in us a spirit of surrender, a spirit of welcome, a spirit of trusting you, confident that you are who you claim to be. And there's some of us thinking it works for other people, but it doesn't work for me, or it won't work for me. That's another lie from the pit of hell. What makes you so special that God doesn't work for you? Lord, we welcome your presence. We welcome your presence. We're just going to worship now the shepherd, the ever-present King.